Hello humans, Master Genderflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve, and today I thought I would do something different. I'm gonna try making a video about unfinished archetypes. Now this is really, you could say this is kind of subjective, because what does unfinished mean in the context of Yu-Gi-Oh? And for me, that definition is quite simple. When an archetype cannot achieve its own playstyle, it's unfinished. Like, as simple as that is to say, like, when an archetype can't achieve its own functional win condition, there is a very critical error going on. So, certain archetypes, no matter how many cards they get, all the cards they get as support fail to address the issue that said deck is missing. I think one of the best examples of this is, like, Dark Lords. The core element that makes that deck unfinished and very difficult to play is the fact that Dark Lords have needed a way to search their spells and traps from the very beginning, and every single support card they ever get doesn't do anything except search them more monsters, which means, like, they're so hopelessly under-equipped to play the game, which is hilarious. So, now that we got this kind of rough definition out of the way, we are going to talk about Amazement. Before I do, I want to say two other things. It's kind of like a small update. I am not going to be doing an update for Agents, and I'm going to hold off on the update for Teller Knights against Stellars. Agents, I have some bad news. That deck has fallen too far for me to want to continue with it. It has lost so many pieces in such quick succession that it was really not fun to try to work with. A lot of that very core foundation of how the deck operated needed certain generic in-board boss monsters to exist. And now that, like, 3 of them that I were using are gone, including Apollosa, which, it's not to, like, say, oh, Apollosa killed my rogue deck, but in reference to Agents, because the fact that it was a Link 4 fairy meant it could be follow-up was actually crazy important. And that part being gone actually mattered more than it being monster negates. So Agents are just really in a rough spot right now, and it's probably going to be a while before I decide to update them again. And then Constellar and Teller Knights, I'll probably do in the future, but I was getting really upset because I had to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Way too much, and I don't like playing this game that often. But now that we're out of the update, let's talk about this archetype. And I call this archetype unfinished. And looking at these series of cards before the Ojamas, you might question why that is. Because every card before these Ojamas is actually really good. Let's start with the boss monster. And very clearly the best card in the entire archetype. Just so much so, like, this card is good, even by the standards I put good cards at. Its weakest effect is, once per turn, you can banish any number of attraction traps from your graveyard, then target that many cards your opponent controls to destroy them. Okay, so its worst effect is Dark Arm Dragon. Very cool. Then, its hard once per turn comes in. If you activate a trap while it's in your hand, you can special summon it. Okay, so it's, what's it called? Both, the Labyrinth, 3000 attack monster, Lady Labyrinth, and Altergeist Multifaker. Very cool. And then when your opponent's normal or special summons a monster, you can target that monster and equip it with an attraction trap from your deck, which, considering all the attraction traps do is equip, and when they're equipped to an opponent's monster, give it a negative effect. So it is a boss monster that acts as disruption, and acts as disruption repeatedly. And then going back into your turn, you can clear off all the remaining slop off the field. That's insane. It's so insane, in fact, that when this deck was, quotations, new, there were plenty of trap decks trying to just put this guy in there with a handful of other attraction traps to make it function. Like, this is very clearly stand out better than every other card I'm about to show you, and that's saying something because some of these cards are very cool. But you'll also see why this is the best card in the archetype once we get to the error that this deck has. Next, we are going to go into Kamika. this archetype was given 5 monsters, and only 2 of them actually matter. And when I say 2 of them, what I really mean is only 1 of them. But this one, in theory, could matter a lot, but doesn't. So when this card is normal summon, you set an attraction trap directly from your deck, and then as a quick effect, you can change what an Amazement card is equipped to on the field. So you can either take it away equipped from your opponent, or equip it to you and give it to an opponent. So it can just flip-flop what it's equipped to. That's very good in specifically the context of Horror House. Let's just skip ahead to this one, because this one's like stand out the best attraction horror. So while it's equipped to your monster, which I should preface by saying all the traps, you target an Amazement monster you control or a face-up monster your opponent controls, and depending on what it's equipped to, will change its effect. So if it's equipped to Comica in context of this, Comica becomes a quick effect targeting monster negate. Very solid. And then you can also, if it's equipped to your opponent, you can change that opponent's monster to face down defense position. Of course, this will fall off. So basically, after you use this as a monster negate, you can then use it as a Book of Moon, which is honestly crazy good. That is 2 disruptions off of 1 single normal summon pass. That's very good, but I'm gonna spoil already. This is like the extent of how good this card can be. And it'll go into what I mean later. And then Amazing Ticket Time. This card is also crazy good in the context of what you're trying to do. So if you activate it, it's a quick play Rhoda. On your turn, if you activate it, you can add an Amazement card from your deck to your hand. That's pretty strong. And then during your opponent's turn, if you activate it, you set an attraction trap directly from your deck, and it can be activated this turn, which is honestly insane. So basically, it's a Rhoda that can change functionality based on the turn you activate it, which means even though this is a hard once per turn, both of them are live if you have both of them, which is kind of insane. Like, this is kind of what I was trying to mention with this archetype. Like, look at all these quality card effects. How could this archetype possibly not function? We'll get into it. Then we got our second attraction trap that's like worth playing. This one, while it's equipped to your Amazement, it can send itself off to be MST. Not bad. And then if it's equipped to an opponent's monster, you can add an Amazement monster from your deck to your hand and equip this card off. So basically, you can make a trap that gets to Arlecchino. Very nice. And we already explained this one. And then, I should say, this was within the first wave of cards. So when this archetype was brand new and people were trying to put this in other trap decks, it was like 2 to 3 of this and then like 2 of this. And you can see why. Like, this is by far the standout best, because the second best, if it's equipped to your monster, you can change its battle position to recycle back an Maze Attraction card, but your opponent gets to pick which one in your graveyard. So, yeah. And then while it's equipped to your opponent, you can turn it into Farfa, which is honestly not bad. It's a pretty solid trap, especially because, like, the other option is Book of Moon, and that obviously doesn't work against links, whereas this can kind of catch the links. So it kind of makes sense. So when you're looking at this, this is actually a pretty solid trap engine. You would think, right? Because you got more recursion, you got Book of Moon that could even pivot into a monster negate, or you can have a card that cycles back or becomes Farfa. Like, these, like, 17 to 18 cards would be a really solid trap engine. So what's wrong with it? Well, it's very simple. Not a single card in this archetype, barring exactly Arlecchino, gets you into the next card. And I can understand what the confusion is if you don't understand how trap decks work. If you are looking at this from the perspective of a person who plays combo decks, like, you're seeing a normal summon that's 2 disruptions, you're seeing, like, pretty quality searchable interactions. What's the issue? Well, the issue is very simple. We'll start with our quotations best normal summon. So we go ahead, normal summon this, and get this down. This is 2 interactions, a Monster Negate and a Book of Moon. Now what? I'm waiting. Your follow-up, as you can see, is nothing. This card is spent entirely and is now a normal monster once you use those 2 interactions. So as this is what I'm kind of meaning. Once you get to use your interactions, that is the very end of what you can do with your hand. So even if you open multiple amazement and attraction cards, what happens is you spend all of them and have no real way to recur them back realistically. Because the rest of the cards in this archetype, I will tell you right now, are very miss and do not really understand the playstyle this deck is trying to go for. Even like one of the newest ones, this card fails to understand what this deck is trying to do. So much of these cards just are very terrible. Like, so basically, here's the error with this deck. This deck does not generate new cards for you, except the very instance they are used. So after you spend after you spend your turn setting up these cards, that's it. There's no more recursion, and there's nothing more you can do with these cards, except with the very best card in this deck, Arlecchino, which can use the ones in graveyard to be pops, and then following back can still be a disruption as long as it stays face up on the field and your opponent's summoning monsters, which is how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. So as you can see, this card is stand out better than anything else because it's the only card in this entire archetype that respects how trap decks play. All of these cards, what they do is they create a very solid interaction for your opponent trying to play exactly once. But when we look at this deck's successor, which I want to say that this deck was probably the building block used to create Labyrinth, which is Labyrinth. It fixed this error immediately. All the Labyrinth cards recycle themselves. All of them get you back into more traps and new traps as well. Like, every error this deck has, Labyrinth went about fixing, which is recursion and repeatability. Whereas this deck, it spends every single thing it has on that very second turn to not even guarantee it'll stop its opponent. Because while these effects are good, none of these effects themselves would win a game. They are just very solid interactions to go with other supplementary trap engines. But the problem is, like, that's the extent of it. Like, all these cards get spent so quick, and they get spent so easily, and they don't get recurred. Like, by choosing to play this deck, you are using a broken engine. The engine is incomplete because for the very, very simple fact that once you activate a card and resolve it, your engine is now dead. It no longer functions. And that is so antithetical to how a trap deck operates. This deck is wildly incompatible with the playstyle it has because it is a one and done. It very much feels like a combo player tried to make a cool trap deck without understanding that a trap deck will probably play into turn 3, turn 4, and even turn 5. Like, there was a fundamental error in understanding the playstyle this deck is trying to be, and that is very unfortunate. And it kind of goes to show, when designing, like, a lot of decks, like, you really have to keep in mind that there is a turn 3 and turn 4 in this game. Like, there needs to be some repeatability to your deck, because, like, when you look at this, I've never seen a normal summon that is so truly spent in the same way that Comica is. It feels very, very dated, like something out of 2011, 2012, when you had to draw your next play rather than your turn 1 play could build into your turn 3 play. It feels very, very out of touch with the game it was actually made for. And this archetype came out in early 2021, which allowed it to be the stepping stone for Labyrinth, of course. But in the context of 2021, the only crazy combo power deck was Drytron. Like, a lot of the decks people were playing were, like, very piddly mid-range decks that any control deck could beat. Like, this, if this was a competent functional deck, it could compete on the same level as those piddle decks. But the problem is, it doesn't operate and doesn't function because there is such a fundamental error with how this deck was designed. Like, it is so insane that you can read all these very solid card effects and know that this deck doesn't operate. That is so incredibly insane to me. And I'm going to be totally honest. I was wanting to come up with a solution to this error, but I really can't because it is so foundational to this deck. Like, how do you go about fixing a deck that's playstyle doesn't respect the playstyle it's supposed to be? Like, you have to make a bunch of trap cards like this that go about getting to your next trap or monster. Like, it is genuinely very far behind where it needs to be, and that is very unfortunate. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if there's any other archetypes you want me to see, or you want me to do this with, just let me know, because I think this is kind of interesting to, like, crack into an archetype's design to see what's wrong with it, because there are plenty of archetypes that do not work. Like, that's the difference, because there's a difference between a bad archetype and an archetype that literally doesn't work. This archetype doesn't work. Like, it literally doesn't function, and I always love, like, breaking into archetypes that literally don't function. But that's gonna be it for me. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Interflex will take your soul.